Materialism is a form of philosophical monism which holds that matter is the fundamental substance in nature, and that all phenomena, including mental phenomena and consciousness, are results of material interactions. Materialism is closely related to physicalism, the view that all that exists is ultimately physical. Philosophical physicalism has evolved from materialism with the discoveries of the physical sciences to incorporate more sophisticated notions of physicality than mere ordinary matter, such as space-time, physical energies and forces, dark matter, and so on. Thus the term physicalism is preferred over materialism by some, while others use the terms as if they are synonymous. Philosophies contradictory to materialism or physicalism include idealism, pluralism, dualism, and other forms of monism. Overview. Materialism belongs to the class of monist ontology. As such, it is different from ontological theories based on dualism or pluralism. For singular explanations of the phenomenal reality, materialism would be in contrast to idealism, neutral monism, and spiritualism. Despite the large number of philosophical schools and subtle nuances between many, all philosophies are said to fall into one of two primary categories, which are defined in contrast to each other: idealism and materialism. The basic proposition of these two categories pertains to the nature of reality, and a primary distinction between them is the way they answer two fundamental questions: what does reality consist of, and how does it originate? To idealists, spirit and mind are the objects of mind are primary, and matter secondary. To materialists, matter is primary, and mind or spirit or ideas are secondary, the product of matter acting upon matter. The materialist view is perhaps best understood in its opposition to the doctrines of immaterial substance applied to the mind historically, famously by René Descartes. However, by itself materialism says nothing about how material substance should be characterized. In practice, it is frequently assimilated to one variety of physicalism or another. Materialism is often associated with reductionism, according to which the objects are phenomena individuated at one level of description. If they are genuine, must be explicable in terms of the objects of phenomena at some other level of description, typically at a more reduced level. Non-reductive materialism explicitly rejects this notion, however, taking the material constitution of all particulars to be consistent with the existence of real objects' properties, or phenomena not explicable in the terms canonically used for the basic material constituents. Jerry Fedor influentially argues this view, according to which empirical laws and explanations in special sciences like psychology or geology are invisible from the perspective of basic physics. A lot of vigorous literature has grown up around the relation between these views. Modern philosophical materialists extend the definition of other scientifically observable entities such as energy, forces, and the curvature of space. However, philosophers such as Mary Midgley suggest that the concept of matter is elusive and poorly defined. Materialism typically contrasts with dualism, phenomenalism, idealism, vitalism, and dual-aspect monism. Its materiality can, in some ways, be linked to the concept of determinism, as espoused by Enlightenment thinkers. During the 19th century, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels extended the concept of materialism to elaborate a materialist conception of history centered on the roughly empirical world of human activity and the institutions created, reproduced, or destroyed by that activity. Later Marxists developed the notion of dialectical materialism, which characterized later Marxist philosophy and method. History. Axial age. Materialism developed, possibly independently, in several geographically separated regions of Eurasia during what Karl Jaspers termed the Axial Age. In ancient Indian philosophy, materialism developed around 600 BC with the works of Ahita Kesakumbali, Payasi, P. Kannada, and the proponents of the Karvaka school of philosophy. Kannada became one of the early proponents of atomism. The Nayavasika school developed one of the earliest forms of atomism, though the proofs of God and the positing that consciousness was not material precludes labeling them as materialists. Buddhist atomism and the Jaina school continued the atomic tradition. Zunzi developed a Confucian doctrine centered on realism and materialism in ancient China. Ancient Greek philosophers like Thales, Anaxagoras, Epicurus and Democritus prefigure later materialists. The Latin poem De Rerum Natura by Lucretius reflects the mechanistic philosophy of Democritus and Epicurus. According to this view, all that exists is matter and void, and all phenomena result from different motions and conglomerations of base material particles called atoms. De Rerum Natura provides mechanistic explanations for phenomena such as erosion, evaporation, wind, and sound. Famous principles like nothing can touch body but body first appeared in the works of Lucretius. Democritus and Epicurus, however, did not hold to a monist ontology, since they held to the ontological separation of matter and space, i.e., space being another kind of being, indicating that the definition of materialism is wider than given scope for in this article. Common Era. Chinese thinkers of the early Common Era said to be materialists include Zhang Zhong and Wang Chong. Later Indian materialist Jayarashi Bhatta in his work Tattva Papav Simha refuted the Nyaya epistemology. The materialistic Karvaka philosophy appears to have died out sometime after 1400. When Madhavacharya compiled Sarvadasana Samgraha in the 14th century, he had no Karvaka Lokayata text to quote from, or even refer to. In early 12th century Al-Andalus, the Arabian philosopher Ibn Tufayl wrote discussions on materialism in his philosophical novel, Ibn Yaqdan, while vaguely foreshadowing the idea of a historical materialism. Modern Era. The French cleric Pierre Gassendi represented the materialist tradition in opposition to the attempts of René Descartes to provide the natural sciences with dualist foundations. There followed the materialist and atheist Abbé Jean Meslier, Julien Offray de la Mettrie, the German-French Paul Henry Thierry Baron d'Holbach, the encyclopedist Denis Diderot, and other French Enlightenment thinkers, as well as John Walking Stewart, whose insistence in seeing matter is endowed with a moral dimension had a major impact on the philosophical poetry of William Wordsworth. Arthur Schopenhauer wrote that materialism is the philosophy of the subject who forgets to take account of himself. He claimed that an observing subject can only know material objects through the mediation of the brain and its particular organization. That is, the brain itself is the determiner of how material objects will be experienced or perceived. Everything objective, extended, active, and hence everything material, is regarded by materialism as so solid a basis for its explanations that a reduction to this can leave nothing to be desired. But all this is something that is given only very indirectly and conditionally, and is therefore only relatively present, for it has passed through the machinery and fabrication of the brain, and hence has entered the forms of time, space, and causality, by virtue of which it is first of all presented as extended in space and operating in time. The German materialist and atheist anthropologist Ludwig Feuerbach would signal a new turn in materialism through his book, The Essence of Christianity, which provided a humanist account of religion as the outward projection of man's inward nature. Feuerbach's materialism would later heavily influence Karl Marx. More recently, thinkers such as Gilles Deleuze have attempted to rework and strengthen classical materialist ideas. Contemporary theorists such as Manuel de Landa, working with this reinvigorated materialism, have come to be classified as new materialist in persuasion. New materialism has now become its own specialized subfield of knowledge, with courses being offered on the topic at major universities, as well as numerous conferences, edited collections, and monographs devoted to it. Jane Bennett's book Vibrant Matter has been particularly instrumental in bringing theories of monist ontology and vitalism back into a critical, theoretical fold dominated by post-structuralist theories of language and discourse. Scholars such as Mel Y. Chen and Zakia Iman Jackson, however, have critiqued this body of new materialist literature for its neglect in considering the materiality of race and gender in particular. Other scholars such as Eliane Vosters have questioned whether there is anything particularly new about this so-called new materialism, as indigenous and other animist ontologies have attested to what might be called the vibrancy of matter for centuries. Scientific materialists, many current and recent philosophers, e.g., Daniel Dennett, Willard Van Orman Quine, Donald Davidson, and Jerry Fedor, operate within a broadly physicalist materialist framework, producing rival accounts of how best to accommodate mind, including functionalism, anomalous monism, identity theory, and so on. Scientific materialism is often synonymous with, and has so far been described as, being a reductive materialism. In recent years, Paul and Patricia Churchland have advocated a radically contrasting position. Eliminativist materialism holds that some mental phenomena simply do not exist at all, and that talk of those mental phenomena reflects a totally spurious folk psychology and introspection illusion. That is, an eliminative materialist might suggest that a concept like belief simply has no basis in fact, the way folk science speaks of demon-caused illnesses. Reductive materialism being at one end of a continuum and eliminative materialism on the other. Revisionary materialism is somewhere in the middle. Some scientific materialists have been criticized, for example by Noam Chomsky, for failing to provide clear definitions for what constitutes matter, leaving the term materialism without any definite meaning. Chomsky also states that since the concept of matter may be affected by new scientific discoveries, as has happened in the past, scientific materialists are being dogmatic in assuming the opposite. Defining matter. The nature and definition of matter, like other key concepts in science and philosophy, have occasioned much debate. Is there a single kind of matter which everything is made of, or multiple kinds? Is matter a continuous substance capable of expressing multiple forms, or a number of discrete, unchanging constituents? Does it have intrinsic properties, or is it lacking them? One challenge to the traditional concept of matter as tangible stuff came with the rise of field physics in the 19th century. Relativity shows that matter and energy are interchangeable. This enables the ontological view that energy is prima materia and matter is one of its forms. On the other hand, the standard model of particle physics uses quantum field theory to describe all interactions. On this view, it could be said that fields are prima materia and the energy is a property of the field. According to the dominant cosmological model, the lambda CDM model, less than 5% of the universe's energy density is made up of the matter described by the standard model of particle physics, and the majority of the universe is composed of dark matter and dark energy, with little agreement amongst scientists about what these are made of. With the advent of quantum physics, some scientists believed the concept of matter had merely changed, while others believed the conventional position could no longer be maintained. For instance, Werner Heisenberg said, "The ontology of materialism rested upon the illusion that the kind of existence, the direct actuality, of the world around us can be extrapolated into the atomic range. This extrapolation, however, is impossible. Atoms are not things." Likewise, some philosophers feel that these dichotomies necessitate a switch from materialism to physicalism. Others use the terms materialism and physicalism interchangeably. The concept of matter has changed in response to new scientific discoveries. Thus, materialism has no definite content independent of the particular theory of matter on which it is based. According to Noam Chomsky, any property can be considered material if one defines matter such that it has that property. Physicalism. George Stack distinguishes between materialism and physicalism. In the 20th century, physicalism has emerged out of positivism. Physicalism restricts meaningful statements to physical bodies or processes that are verifiable or in principle verifiable. It is an empirical hypothesis that is subject to revision and hence lacks the dogmatic stance of classical materialism. Herbert Fayle defended physicalism in the United States and consistently held that mental states are brain states and that mental terms have the same referent as physical terms. The 20th century has witnessed many materialist theories of the mental, and much debate surrounding them, criticism and alternatives. Scientific objections. Some modern-day physicists and science writers, such as Paul Davies and John Gribben, have argued that materialism has been disproven by certain scientific findings in physics, such as quantum mechanics and chaos theory. In 1991, Gribben and Davies released their book, The Matter Myth, the first chapter of which, The Death of Materialism, contained the following passage: "Then came our quantum theory, which totally transformed our image of matter. The old assumption that the microscopic world of atoms was simply a scaled-down version of the everyday world had to be abandoned. Newton's deterministic machine was replaced by a shadowy and paradoxical conjunction of waves and particles, governed by the laws of chance, rather than the rigid rules of causality. An extension of the quantum theory goes beyond even this. It paints a picture in which solid matter dissolves away, to be replaced by weird excitations and vibrations of invisible field energy. Quantum physics undermines materialism because it reveals that matter has far less substance than we might believe. But another development goes even further by demolishing Newton's image of matter as inert lumps. This development is the theory of chaos, which has recently gained widespread attention. Davis and Gribben's objections are shared by proponents of digital physics who view information rather than matter to be fundamental. Their objections were also shared by some founders of quantum theory, such as Max Planck, who wrote, "As a man who has devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you as a result of my research about atoms this much: there is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particle of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter." Religious and spiritual views. According to Konstantin Gutberlit, writing in Catholic Encyclopedia, materialism, defined as a philosophical system which regards matter as the only reality in the world, denies the existence of God and the soul. Materialism, in this view, therefore becomes incompatible with most world religions, including Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. In such a context one can conflate materialism with atheism. However, Friedrich Longy wrote in 1892, Diderot has not always in the encyclopedia expressed his own individual opinion, but it is just as true that at its commencement he had not yet got as far as atheism and materialism. Most of Hinduism and transcendentalism regards all matter as an illusion called Maya, blinding humans from knowing the truth. Maya is the limited, purely physical and mental reality in which our everyday consciousness has become entangled. Maya gets destroyed for a person when he perceives Brahman with transcendental knowledge. In contrast, Joseph Smith, the founder of the Latter-day Saint movement, taught there is no such thing as immaterial matter. All spirit is matter, but it is more finer, pure, and can only be discerned by purer eyes. We cannot see it, but when our bodies are purified we shall see that it is all matter. Quote, this spirit element has always existed. It is co-eternal with God. It is also called intelligence or the light of truth, which like all observable matter was not created or made, neither indeed can be. Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints viewed the revelations of Joseph Smith as a restoration of original Christian doctrine, which they believe post-apostolic theologians began to corrupt in the centuries after Christ. The writings of many of these theologians indicate a clear influence of Greek metaphysical philosophies such as Neoplatonism, which characterized divinity as an utterly simple, immaterial, formless substance, essence that transcended all that was physical. Despite strong opposition from many Christians, this metaphysical depiction of God eventually became incorporated into the doctrine of the Christian Church, displacing the original Judeo-Christian concept of a physical, corporeal God who created humans in his image and likeness. Philosophical objections. Kant argued against all three forms of materialism, subjective idealism and dualism. However, Kant also argues that change and time require an enduring substrate, and does so in connection with his refutation of idealism. Postmodern, post-structuralist thinkers also express a skepticism about any all-encompassing metaphysical scheme. Philosopher Mary Midgley, among others, argues that materialism is a self-refuting idea, at least in its eliminative form. Idealism's an argument for idealism, such as those of Hegel and Berkeley, is ipso facto an argument against materialism. Matter can be argued to be redundant, as in bundle theory, and mind-independent properties can in turn be reduced to subjective percepts. Berkeley presents an example of the latter by pointing out that it is impossible to gather direct evidence of matter, as there is no direct experience of matter. All that is experienced is perception, whether internal or external. As such, the existence of matter can only be assumed from the apparent stability of perceptions. It finds absolutely no evidence in direct experience. If matter and energy are seen as necessary to explain the physical world, but incapable of explaining mind, dualism results. Emergence, holism, and process philosophy seek to ameliorate the perceived shortcomings of traditional materialism without abandoning materialism entirely. Materialism as methodology. Some critics object to materialism as part of an overly skeptical, narrow, reductivist approach to theorizing, rather than to the ontological claim that matter is the only substance. Particle physicist and Anglican theologian John Polkinghorne objects to what he calls promissory materialism, claims that materialistic science will eventually succeed in explaining phenomena it has not so far been able to explain. Polkinghorne prefers dual-aspect monism to faith in materialism.